Hello and welcome to the Lit Lotus podcast. This is the podcast for empaths, yogis, and spiritual beings who are seeking transformation in their mind, body, and spiritual health through a holistic approach to wellness. I am your host, Melinda Van Kirk. I lead transformational journeys to better health and wellness through self-love, self-care, and simple habit evolution, following the ancient wisdom of Ayurveda. Ayurveda is yoga's sister science, and it approaches health through living a life of ease with less stress, simple foods, and straightforward daily routines to help you rebalance your mind, body, and consciousness. I lead a year-long group called the Living Inspiration Tribe, and this is a collective tribe of women who have committed to improving their mind, body, and spiritual health in a holistic way. The women in my group experience better sleep, improved energy, a healthier weight, reduced stress, and they feel reconnected to their bodies. We love, we inspire, and we thrive. We are lit, we are creative, and we are an amazing group of women. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, please head on over to my website at melindavankirk.com. You can select the Living Inspiration Tribe at the top. And also I offer one-on-one wellness coaching. If you're a little bit more interested in sort of sampling what I do, head on over to the offerings tab on my webpage. And soon this webpage will be on litlotus.me. We are not quite there yet as of the date of recording this podcast, but that is coming. So you will be able to find me in either location for a little while. But today's podcast in particular is we're going to start reconnecting to how we experience nature in our bodies and how we can reconnect to the rhythms of nature. So I'm really excited for today's episode, and we're going to let it be kind of organic. So I hope if you have questions, you send me a message. You can send me a message on Insight Timer. I'm on the app. I also teach yoga there weekly, and you can do some free yoga practices with me Friday mornings, Eastern Time at 8 a.m. And you can send me a message on my website. Send me an email. And Instagram as well, which is under Melinda Van Kirk Wellness at the current time of this podcast. So today we're going to talk about really sinking back into the rhythms of nature. But before we get into what that entails, I'd like to bring in this concept of Svadhyaya. Svadhyaya in yoga is one of the niyamas or observances. The niyamas in the traditional yogic teachings is the second limb of yoga. There's 8 limbs in total. And then within the niyamas, there are 5 principles. And Svadhyaya, as I was saying, is the idea of self-study. And when we study the self, we can begin to align with our beliefs, our intentions, and we are doing this from a place of within. So we're tuning out all the mental chatter, and we're tapping back into what feels right for us. So what feels right for you in a moment? You're tuning into your intuition, and you're almost stepping outside of yourself. So often we don't realize that we are influenced by many, many external things. When you're not in alignment with your higher self. But we have a tendency to fall into victim mode. And I'll just share with you, I was absolutely this way for many, many, many years until I really started to delve into some of these yogic concepts and understand that I was putting myself in victim mode. And that word is really harsh for people to hear. It was very harsh for me to hear when I started thinking about it, like, well, I don't think I'm a victim. But it's that idea that we start to blame external things or people outside of ourselves for our decisions. So we often start to feel stuck and like we don't have a choice. We might feel helpless, and that's where victim mode comes in. When we give over our power to something else, we internalize that and we become the victim. So let me give you a little example. When I first started working in the corporate world and I had someone helping me, she wasn't reporting into me, but she was an assistant. She was helping me as well as another person. And I used to get really frustrated when she didn't do things the way I wanted them done. Now, what I didn't realize is that I probably never explained properly or went back to her, but I used to get all pissed off. Oh my God, now I have to redo all this person's work. And you might relate to that, right? You might have someone that's helped you at work before and you thought, okay, this is great. This is going to be so much help. And it ended up taking you twice as long to go back and fix something that somebody else did. And we start blaming the other person. Well, they don't know what they're doing. They're not skilled. How could they not understand this idea? They should have learned this in school. And now I've got all this work. I got to work late tonight. I don't have time to make dinner. So I'm going to pick up, some fast food on the way home. And it piles on, and you start taking on the world like you don't have a choice. And so for myself, when I would do that, and this was not just once, I had this with other contractors. It took me several years to figure out that, oh my gosh, I'm not teaching this person and guiding them how they needed to be guided for me to get the results that I needed to support me. So that's another conversation. But I was able to, at least at some point, step back and realize this is a pattern. And start noticing that what other people were doing and realizing that I was putting myself in victim mode. And I would do this in a lot of spaces in my life. Just feeling helpless. And those helpless feelings is what led me to depression. And I know I talked in the first episode. If you haven't listened to that, I invite you to go back and listen. But feeling depressed because I felt like I didn't have a choice. I felt like a victim. I felt like everything in the world was happening to me. Oh my God, why does this always happen to me? And I feel like we've probably all said those words at some point in our lives about something. Standing in the grocery store in line, always said that. Oh, I'm always in the longest line. No matter which line I go to, if I move lines, it's going to be longer. And guess what? That almost always came true. But I was putting myself in this mode of like, oh, I'm a victim. Of course this is going to happen to me. And I would manifest those things that happen to me. If you're always thinking something's going to happen to you, guess what? It's going to happen to you. We put ourselves in those positions energetically because we're actually calling that in from the universe. We're telling the universe we want something when we're constantly thinking about it. But we're also putting ourselves in this negative mindset that really isn't helping anything. It's giving over our power to anything outside of ourselves, another person, a situation that we're in. And we're starting to internalize those negative feelings as if we have no choice. We always have a choice. And even if that's a mental shift, that's the choice. You could be in prison and you don't have a choice physically where you're going necessarily in a moment, but you always have a choice of how you handle a situation. You always have a choice in what you say, and you always have a choice in what you act on. And so this idea of self-study is tuning into that inner knowing and starting to recognize and wake up that I always have a choice with how I experience something, because you create your experience. It's this process of learning to step outside of the mind and observe what you're doing. And can be super challenging. We don't always have those moments, myself included. We get caught up in thoughts. It's so easy to get caught up when you're stressed about something, you're feeling insecure about something, you're feeling anxious about something. But we always have this ability to step outside of ourselves. And it can take a lot of work. It can take years of meditation, and you might have years of meditation in your daily practice, but it doesn't mean that those moments don't arise. A really good example, and I hear this from people a lot that I speak to, I used to be skinny and now I've gained weight, and I want to get control of my weight, but it's so hard. I'm aging. It's so hard. I've got all these people around me. It's so hard. And I think there's something wrong with me. And I'm not saying that there isn't any truth to those statements, but again, it's putting yourself in a victim mindset where you're making it hard. You're telling yourself how hard it is, and you're manifesting that difficulty in your life. Or you start blaming, well, my husband cooks dinner, but he doesn't ever make healthy foods, but I don't have time to cook. Again, you're putting yourself in victim mode and you're handing over your power to someone else. And I want to bring this up today because when we put ourselves in victim mode, we really aren't living in alignment with not just our higher self, but we're not living in alignment with the rhythms of nature, with our daily routines, is where we can begin to take that power back. So this is a little bit of why it's important to understand when you put yourself in victim mode, why it's important to bring in this concept of Svadhyaya or self-study. Because when we can start to step out of our minds a little bit, we can begin to realize we can shift our perceptions and we can shift how we take action. And the road to better health is all in taking aligned action. Aligned action is when you have that little light bulb go off in your head, those little aha moments, and then you do something about it. So the next time you find yourself in victim mode, you recognize that you've done something perhaps that didn't serve you so well, whether that's in your personal relationships, your work life, your food choices. And then you start to ask yourself, well, what can I do to get myself out of victim mode? And the moment you take any action, you've now taken back your power and you are empowered to make the choices that are going to serve you. And serving yourself is hugely important, and it's not selfish. It doesn't mean that you disregard all the other people in your life. And I've said this before, but when you serve yourself, when you take care of yourself first, you become that person that's able then to spread that energy, that love, that light to other people. If you're constantly feeling like you're taking care of other people and not taking care of yourself, you're most likely putting yourself back into victim mindset. And you might recognize that you're doing this. I talk to a lot of people that recognize when they're doing it, yet they may not be taking the aligned action. And then they get themselves back in this negative mindset of, why is this so hard? I can't do this. So a good example would be you are feeling depleted. You've got kids at home. You're constantly having to give to the kids. And I'm not necessarily talking about an infant or toddler that really can't do much to take care of themselves, although they can at toddler age. They can start to take steps, right? Newborn, not so much. They need, 100% dependent on you. But if you've got kids at home, you can empower your children at home to help you take care of yourself. A good example is you're preparing dinner for the kids and they finished eating. If they're old enough to walk their dish over to the sink, you're giving them power, and you're also taking stress off yourself. So when you carve out time for yourself, that's going to reflect into the time you spend with your children. And your children are going to be happier, ultimately. They might not understand it if you're making a shift. If you say, no, mommy needs to do this first before she can sit down with you and play a game or whatever it is. But taking time for yourself, even if that's 5 minutes in a room, sitting in silence, it can be in the bathroom. You don't have to tell everyone in the world what you're doing. But you're just saying, oh my gosh, I'm taking this time for myself. I'm carving out this routine for myself in the morning before the kids get up in order to fill yourself up, fill your cup. And then when that cup is full and runneth over, that spills out to everybody else. So again, the moment you take action is the moment you're taking back your power and not feeling like I'm a victim. Especially being a mom with younger kids, you do tend to feel like a victim. You feel like you have to do everything. But the moment you say, no, I don't have to do everything, and my kids are old enough, and I'm going to teach them how to do the things I need them to do in order for me to create the life that I want, you're helping everyone. You're helping yourself, and you're helping your children, and you're giving them the power to do, and they're going to feel empowered, and you're going to feel empowered. And there's no more victim mindset. So what does this have to do with Ayurveda? We're gonna kind of shift gears, and then we're going to bring these concepts back together. So in Ayurveda, there is something called the Doshas. And if you're familiar with Ayurveda at all, you've probably heard of these. But the doshas are three types of energy. There's vata, pitta, and kapha. And these three types of energy are governed by the elements. So everything in Ayurveda comes back to the 5 elements. So we have earth, water, fire, air, and ether, or space, if you want to call it space. And these 5 elements are prevalent throughout our lives, not just within ourselves, but in everything in nature. And we tend to have different balances of these elements within our bodies. So what the doshas are, it's grouping these energy types together. So vata is the energy of air and ether. It's light, it's cold, it's dry, it's brittle, it's windy, it's movement. It can also be expansiveness. Pitta is the energy of water and fire. And water and fire are both transformational. So pitta is our empowered self. It is our action in our bodies. It's the action in our lives. It's also hot. It's sharp. It can be oily. All right. And then the energy of kapha is earth and water. And kapha energy is cool. It's damp. It's grounded. It's earthy, right? You got to connect these ideas of like, what would earth and water look like? How does that show up in your body? How does that show up in nature around you? How does that show up in your in the season and your time of life? So these 3 doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha, govern everything, and they're all prevalent in all areas of our lives. So when we look at Ayurveda, one of the first things, if you have an Ayurvedic assessment done by a practitioner or doctor, is that they're going to ask you a lot of questions. They're going to ask you how you've been most of your life. Like when you've been in balance in your life, how have you been? And they're going to determine what kind of balance of vata, pitta, and kapha you are. So we all have all 3 doshas within us. If you are more even between the doshas, you might be considered tridoshic, meaning all 3 doshas are prevalent in yourself in about the same ratio. A lot of us will be predominantly 2 doshas. So you might be vata, pitta, so predominantly vata, but then pitta is secondary, and then kapha would be tertiary. Or you might be predominantly 1 dosha. Let's say you're predominantly pitta dosha. And I'll give examples of how this shows up in your life. But the importance of the Ayurvedic assessment is to sort of start to recognize how these elements and how the things connected to these elements show up in your body. And that's where self-study comes in. So part of this self-study is the mental, the intuitive, but then understanding the Ayurvedic concepts and how they play into your physical body, your mental body, your spiritual body. How these things play into who you are. And we are all unique. We all have a unique makeup. So Ayurveda is just kind of starting to dissect it and show trends, things that you might notice. And when we understand these concepts, then we can begin to understand the self better. We can begin to tap into who we are as wonderful human beings on this planet. And then we can make the changes that are going to benefit us the most. Take those aligned action steps. They're going to help you say, okay, this sounds right to me. This is going to help my body. Or I'm going to try this out and see how it helps me. And if it doesn't work, then I'm going to go back and look at it a little bit further. So when we begin to study ourselves, we really begin to tap into and tune into what feels right. And I don't mean the mental brain feels right, because the mental brain, there's obviously it's going to benefit us in a lot of ways, but it also can be a hindrance. You know, when you're craving something strong, mentally you might be thinking, oh, if I just eat a little bit of cake, that's going to take care of my cravings. But it might not at all. And what you might really be needing, instead of that sweet bite of cake, which is going to exacerbate the cravings of sweet, is to have something bitter to balance it out. So in Ayurveda, like increases like and opposites balance. So let's just talk a little bit more about the doshas. The energy of Vata, again, is air and ether, and this is connected to the fall season and winter season. So if you think about the energies of that time of year, if you're in a climate that has 4 seasons, it's chilly, it's cold, it's very brittle, it's very dry, it can be very scattered movement, there can be a lot of wind in the air, especially early winter is the perfect time to describe Vata, but moving late fall, early winter. So it's that energy of like really cold, and you might notice that you get really aggravated this time of year. Maybe you're constantly cold and you have dry skin, dry hair. You might notice these elements show up in your body. And if you are predominantly Vata dosha, you're predominantly air and ether, you are going to be more aggravated during this time of the year because like increases like. So you're going to notice, oh my gosh, winter's coming. I hate this time of year. My body's already so cold and dry. It just gets so much more dried out. It gets so much colder. My hair is just like ready to break. It's so dry and brittle. My skin is dry and my joints are cracking a lot more. And when you see those elements show up in yourself, one, it's probably an imbalance in that dosha. But two, you might start to recognize, oh yeah, this is actually how I kind of am naturally, so I need to do things to help balance that out. So even in summer, which you might be thriving as Vata dosha in summer, you still might have a tendency towards those things. They're just not aggravated as much. Mentally speaking, Vata shows up in your thought patterns, shows up in your sleep patterns. If you have difficulty falling asleep or difficulty staying asleep, insomnia is a sign of Vata dosha imbalance. The brain starts going, the wheels start churning, and it's hard to shut off. That's that scattered element of air and ether or space, right? And your thoughts keep going and going and going. You might have anxiety, and those are things that are all linked to an imbalance in Vata dosha. You might be very flighty and kind of be in your head a lot and flit around, and Vatas tend to be really thin, or at least when they're in balance, they are naturally thin. So if you think back to science class, the ectomorphic body type is what we generally connect to Vata dosha. You might be very tall or very short. And your movements are quick and kind of flit around, just like the elements of air and ether. So I'm trying to paint a picture here of what a typical Vata dominant person might look like or might think like. That does not mean that that's everything that they are. So like I said, we are all 3 doshas, we are all 5 elements, and it's just finding that balance and recognizing when those things go out of balance and using our daily routine and food to bring us back into homeostasis, which is the ultimate goal again of Ayurveda and of yoga, really. So that's why these 2 things go hand in hand. The principles and the philosophies go hand in hand with the physical actions. Let's talk a little bit more about Pitta dosha. Pitta is your fire and water again. These are your transformational elements. When we are a little bit out of control in our Pitta, we might be overly dominant. You may know someone in your life that's overly dominant. They might have a little too much fire, but they tend to burn themselves out. So Pitta is the energy of that transformation, but then sometimes it goes too far. So Pittas need to be very careful because they can push, and they need to find that time and space to help balance themselves out, to bring in that cooling nature. Maybe their yoga practice becomes their cooling practice. Summer is the time of Pitta, that really hot heat. And so when summer heat is prevalent, Pittas tend to go out of balance because they already have naturally so much fire inside of them. They are very aggravated by the heat. Pittas tend to like cooler temperatures, cooler climates. Again, they tend to be go-getters, but they might overdo it a little bit. So they need that time to rest and come back into balance. And then lastly, we'll talk about Kapha. Kapha is the time of late winter and early spring. So for me right now, it's Kapha time. And it's that cool, damp period of time. It's also the energy of earth and water. So if you think about earth energy, it can be very heavy. It's very grounding. You're connected to nature. But when kapha is out of balance, it pulls us down. We might feel lethargic. We might feel slow. You might actually have physical congestion and mucus in the head. So it's the energy that's moving down. Pitta is the energy that's moving up. It's the fire. And then vata is the scattered energy. So if kapha energy goes out of balance and you're feeling so down and lethargic and tired, you might feel depressed with that. And depression can show up in different ways with different doshas. But you may just start to feel like you don't want to do anything. That's kapha going out of balance. So even if you're predominantly pitta, it doesn't mean that you don't have that kapha energy and you might go out of balance that way. Body type wise, I didn't mention this, but pitta is usually your kind of more muscular, your mesomorphic body type, kind of that medium build. You don't tend to fluctuate weight very much. You might build muscle quite easily. You're not super curvy, and you're just that more athletic build. Kapha can be super strong. So you think of the strength of earth, the strength of water, very grounded. Kapha out of balance tends to gain weight. So that's your endomorphic body type if you're looking at the physical only. You also might tend to be more curvy if you're a woman, bigger hips, bigger bust, that very like hourglass shape. And when it goes out of balance, like I was saying, you might tend to gain weight. So I think a lot of people feel like they have a kapha imbalance. And you can be vata and still have that excess weight. I just want to be very clear about that. People tend to think, oh, I'm kapha because I'm overweight. That's not necessarily true. You might have a kapha imbalance, but you might actually be predominantly pitta. And it goes back to the choices we make. But if you think about your most balanced state of life, have you always felt like you were overweight? Or are you that person that has like amazing endurance? Kaphas have that amazing energy that can go all day. Vatas have very little consistent energy, right? They move a lot, but then they need to rest, or they're completely overdone, overworked, burned out. Kaphas have like that worker energy where they are strong, they can keep going, they do all day long, and they're really good at the routine and staying in rhythm with this routine. So when kaphas come into balance, they have this amazing energy. They also have this earthly energy of like love and compassion and kindness. So I always feel bad when people automatically think that they're kapha and they don't want to be kapha because they're overweight. I'd like to disconnect that idea right now, because the kapha energy is amazing, kind, caring, loving, compassionate energy. And yes, you may have struggled with weight your whole life, but that doesn't mean that's not a great dosha in your life, because you have this amazing energy, this caring earthly energy, and you actually have the ability to be like the strongest athletes are kapha dosha. They can have the endurance like no other dosha. So I just want to be really clear about that as you investigate how these things show up for you and you start to think about it. And you can go online and take a dosha quiz, Banyan Botanicals, Chopra Center, John Duyard's Life Spa. There's so many different avenues. You can sort of get an idea for yourself. And you can also have an assessment done where a pulse reader will take your pulse, or an Ayurvedic practitioner can look at your tongue and tell you a little bit more about what your imbalances are and what your dosha might be. So I encourage you to go explore that on your own. And as you explore that on your own, start to notice how these things show up for you in your life. Notice how the seasons might affect this, and also where you're at in your time of life. So our youth, we are governed by kapha dosha, probably up through teenage years. And then as we come into our 20s and adulthood, we're actually predominantly governed by this pitta dosha, these elements of fire. And then as we reach older age or menopause and beyond, this is our vata time of life. And you can see how that shows up physically in the body, because as youth, we're more oily, right? You think about acne on the skin, even if that's an imbalance for that age. But we have that different energy, that earth and water energy from our youth through our teenage years. And then as we move into our adult years, it's a lot of doing, a lot of action. It's that pitta energy that we need. And then as we grow older and you might retire, you'll notice the body physically changing. We do get drier right? We become gray. We lose a little bit of that fire that's within us, and we're much more maybe calm. I don't know if that's the right word, but we're more in tune with life as we reach those elder years. So I invite you to just begin this idea of self-study. What can you learn about yourself? What can you bring in to your life now that helps you come back into this idea of homeostasis? And I'd also like to introduce this idea in the podcast today of how we can sync up our daily routine to create the rhythms in our life that we need. How do we start taking aligned action to create the life that you want? Traditionally in Ayurveda, there's kind of a strict protocol, and I do follow that pretty well, but I also firmly believe in tapping into yourself and noticing what works for you, whether that means keeping a little bit of a journal for your food. That's really helpful if you eat something that doesn't sit well with you, and then writing down actually the things that do work well for you. And you'll notice as you eat throughout the seasons how that changes and shifts. It's not going to be the same all the time. We want to eat with the seasons. We want to be aware of the energy of the season and become in sync with that energy. We're not here to battle things. And I bring this up because I always hear people like they're fighting against their weight. They're fighting against this. They're not sleeping. And it's like a constant battle of trying to change things, but we're doing it in a way that feels aggressive. It's a very pitta way of handling things. And we're in a very pitta culture. We're in this culture of doing all the time. And as we get more technology, more social media, we're doing more and more and more. We're constantly stimulated. So to realign with nature's rhythms, we need to allow space. We need to bring in the flow, stop fighting against things. Even with disease, we're fighting disease. We're fighting cancer. We're battling. When you're constantly fighting and like increases like, you're going to invite in more of that. When we can relax into it and say, I'm going to go with the flow, and I might be changing what I'm doing, but I'm not constantly fighting. Even if you're sick with cancer, there's things that you can do where you're tuning into what your body needs to help bring it back into homeostasis. We're not fighting the cancer cells, but we're using our mental and physical actions to bring in wellness. So we want to bring in those thoughts of health, those thoughts of being in balance. We want to eat the foods that support us, the foods that we know are going to help our gut, that's going to help bring us back to balance. And so I invite you to shift your thinking from this idea of constant doing, to how can I change my actions or do less to support myself? How can I bring myself back into a state of homeostasis? And we start with Svadhyaya. We start with the idea of self-study. So I've got a little action for you to do if you're able to do this, or you can come back to this whenever you can. But I'd like you to start with perhaps doing a little investigating of yourself. So keep a journal around. Notice the moments that you're in flow. You're feeling good. You're feeling on top of the world. Your mind feels balanced. You feel like you're in a state of homeostasis. And maybe this is just bullets. I'm not asking you to spend 20 minutes a day journaling. Take 2 minutes and just write a few bullets. Like, oh, I'm feeling great today. What's helping me feel great? Well, I meditated this morning. Perhaps I went to yoga class. Perhaps I went for a morning walk. What did I do to take care of myself that's making me feel so great? Or maybe it's even something with work. I did awesome at a presentation and now I'm on top of the world. But you're bringing in that energy and you're reflecting on that energy. And that's the energy that we want to create. So anytime you're feeling really good, I want you to notate that. And if you're feeling really bad, maybe make a mental note, just stepping back. And it's okay to have the bad feelings. I'm not telling you you have to feel great all the time. It's actually really important to recognize when you're having those moments and stepping outside of yourself. Part of self-study is stepping outside of those thoughts. How can you bring yourself back into balance? And part of bringing yourself back into balance is recognizing the feelings. And not just sad, happy, but what else are you feeling? Are you feeling frustration? Are you feeling joy? Are you feeling, depressed? Are you feeling anxiety? Like what are you feeling in those moments? And perhaps what brought you to those moments? Did you sleep poorly? Are you just really exhausted and now you're feeling bitter? Or are you feeling amazing because you woke up like you had the best night's sleep ever, or you had this most amazing fresh food for lunch today that you cooked for yourself? Like, what are these things in your daily life and how are they impacting you? Are you overdoing at work? Are you doing too much? Did you skip your lunch today? How does that impact you? So your quote unquote assignment for this week, if you're able to, or you want to, and even if it's a mental note, start somewhere, take the easiest action. I love the idea of keeping a notebook on hand and just jotting something down as it occurs. But I know that can be a big step. So maybe you commit to writing 1 minute before you wrap up your day. Ask yourself what you can commit to. And this is part of those habit shifts, part of the things that we want to make it so easy we can't say no. Perhaps it's making a voice note in your phone. I love to use my phone as a really easy way to do something like this, because sometimes writing, sometimes we hate to write. Sometimes we love it, right? And it can be very therapeutic, but it can also be really hard to get started. And then you're like, oh, I'll do it later because I don't want to get my notebook out. So if you don't want to get your notebook out, can you do a voice memo? Can you use your voice function on your notes app? What can you do to start to draw awareness and this idea of self-study into your life? Where do you notice these elements or these doshas showing up for you? Are you exerting too much pitta energy and burning yourself out? Are you feeling super lethargic and imbalanced in your kapha energy? Are you stuck in your head and feel like you can't get out of it? Is it too much vata? So that's kind of all I really wanted to talk about today. And then we'll begin to talk about through this podcast how we can bring ourselves back to homeostasis. What are these simple changes that we can make to bring us back into balance? But it all starts with this idea of self-study, Svadhyaya. And we'll get deeper into syncing up with nature's rhythms. But this is step 1 to living in sync with nature's rhythms. This is where it all begins, is understanding and studying and recognizing. And if you want to know a little bit more, please go on over to my website. Check out the Living Inspiration Tribe, see what we do. And in this group, I lead these women on this transformational journey. And it all starts with the mindset shift, and then it starts with awareness. So we do things a little bit in reverse. There's different philosophies, because we still want to take action. But I personally find it easier to start with the concepts, and then we begin to take action. So maybe you start to recognize that you need to meditate every day, and that's going to help you the most. So where can you begin to take action to keep yourself in this state of homeostasis, of ease, of flow? Maybe it's a good night's sleep. For me, that's absolutely number 1. Meditation's number 2. But if I have a crap night's sleep, I'm still going to use my meditation practice. But for me, it's like, I need sleep. What do I need to do to maintain that sleep? And that is my priority in my life, because that is the thing that keeps me in balance. That is the thing that allows me to do for others after I've done for myself. All right, I'm going to wrap it up here today, but please head on over to melindavankirk.com, soon to be litlotus.me, and do a little exploring Feel free to send me a message. If you would like a self-discovery session, that is available on my website. And this is for those that want to just explore a little bit deeper and feel like they might be ready to take next steps. There's no commitment in this. It's a 30-minute phone call or Zoom call. And I just help you get really clear on what your wellness goals are. If you are not ready, no worries. You don't need to sign up for this session, but I just want to put the invitation out there. And there's also an application on my website if you feel like you are definitely ready, and then we will schedule a call and go from there. But again, the first call is free. There's no commitment. There's no salesiness. I'm not like that at all. I hate high pressure sales, and I don't think people deserve to be treated like that. So I'm just here to help you explore and help you find, hopefully, what will work for you. And that might be coming on board with me in coaching, whether it's one-on-one coaching or in the group setting, or it might be finding help elsewhere. Maybe you're not ready to make these changes completely, but you're ready to make some small shifts. And I hopefully can help you find someone to do that. Or maybe you're like, energetically, I need to clear out some stuff. I need a Reiki session. Like, there's a lot of ways you can work with me or work with others, and I can certainly send you to those people. If you're in the Columbus, Ohio area, I will absolutely give you referrals to people here, including my Ayurvedic doctor, if you want to get a full assessment done. She's amazing. Or I can help steer you in the right direction. So please do a little exploration this week. Bring in your self-study. Ask yourself, what do you need? And ask yourself where you're in alignment and where you're out of alignment. And just begin to notice. Okay, thank you so much for joining me today on this little bit longer podcast, but I appreciate all of you who are here in this community who want to know more. Lit Lotus, we love, inspire, and thrive. And we are here to spread the word about finding better health through our daily routines, through habit evolution, and through the support of a community. And that's really what this is all about. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Namaste.